All right, I've got an incredible show today with Jack Posobiec. We are going to be covering 6 or 7 major stories that I think you'll be interested in. Jack, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Well, Stephen, it's been an incredible time. Just since the last time you and I have talked, I feel like so much has gone on. We've seen the primaries really solidify. I kind of think end at this point. We've seen Ukraine is just completely spiraling out of control so much that Vicky Nuland just touched down in Kiev last night saying, no, everything is fine. Don't worry, everybody. And there's like nobody around her. And then, of course, the border is still completely open. And in Washington, D.C., it's really just become a blame game in Washington, D.C., because Biden is trying very hard. And Andrew Bates is like locked in this Twitter battle with Stephen Miller, saying, "Well, it's really Trump's fault the border's this way. You see, because Trump refused to shut it down, and it's like." Guys, you have the White House. You have the executive power. You could send the U.S. military there right now, just declare an invasion and do it. And they're still playing this weird blame game because, unfortunately, that problem has spilled over into the mainstream media the same way that all of these third world migrant caravans are spilling over into our country. It's completely insane, but hey, we're here.
Yeah. I feel like every problem the White House has that they can't justify, lie about, or explain, the answer always ends up blame it on Donald Trump. And I get so sick of that. I think even my Democrat family is sick of that, where they're just like, okay, listen, you've got to explain this. You've got to help me understand. You've got to justify this. If they
Right.
can't do any of that, boom, just blame Donald Trump. The media will have your back and everybody goes crazy. But the rest of us who know that we're being gaslit, we're sitting back going, wait, how can you blame Donald Trump? He hasn't been in office for 3 years. Like this, so it's just it's absolute insanity.
Yeah, there's kind of a grace period basically where, I think early on in the Biden administration that Biden supporters or I would say Democrats in general, I don't know that many, I don't know if I've ever met like an actual Biden fan. But the general Democrats, the left, they said, okay, we're going to go along with this because we're so happy Trump is gone. They've got this honeymoon period, this guy, and they tried to do this whole fake relationship between him and Kamala that they were, buddy buddy, the same way that he was buddy buddy with Obama. They tried to recreate it, even though it's completely fake. And there's no love lost between the two of them, which James O'Keefe, of course, proved and corroborated a lot of my reporting on that early on. We'll get into that in a little bit, but there comes a point where several years on, people will start to say, the world didn't seem to be spiraling out of control the way that it is right now when Trump was in office. And yeah, maybe we didn't, if you're a Democrat, if you're an independent, you might be thinking, I didn't maybe all of his tweets, or maybe I didn't like the way that he talked to a reporter, but I was making a lot more money and gas was a lot cheaper and things didn't seem like they were blowing up and World War III wasn't on the horizon and we weren't talking about bombing Iran and going into direct war with Iran and Russia and China all at the same time, that all actually had kind of seemed to be a little bit died down. And so this idea, at some point, people are going to realize that, what, the emperor has no clothes, and all it's going to take is someone to walk up and point up and say, what, that 80-year-old guy is walking around the White House naked, and we can all see it.
Yeah. Well, according to Alex Jones, that's happening anyway. So
Wouldn't surprise me. Hey,
yeah,
LBJ did it too.
that's what they say. They found Biden wandering around the White House naked a couple of times, according to Alex Jones. So I'll just leave it at that. Help me understand this, Jack. President Biden demands Republicans authorize him to give away more taxpayer money to Ukraine and other parts of the world, but won't fix our own border. For 3 years, he's absolutely denied there was a border crisis and said that Vice President Kamala Harris was doing an excellent job. He's now admitted there's a huge problem on the border, but he has no authority to do anything about it. This president is full of lies. Why is he so determined to completely change the direction of this country?
Well, I think there's a lot going on here. I mean, number one, and I think the most obvious for the Democrats is that they view this as a pool of new voters. They understand that their policies are not popular. They understand that their standing in the country is slipping. Joe Biden's popularity is absolutely in the basement, just like where he ran his campaign through all of 2020. And and I would make a joke about the laptop, but what his brother was up or his son was up to in 2020. But of course, we all know about that. So essentially, what the Democrats are looking at in terms of this massive horde of illegal immigrants, and I think the numbers just speak for themselves at this point, the images that have been coming across, what the Democrats are looking at is a permanent electoral majority. And they're looking at the ability to flip red states like Texas, which, and again, they've publicly stated these things. Joyanne Reed, or as I call her, Joyanne Weave, have been saying this every single night that they are bringing people in. They want to change the electoral demographics of red states. They want to change the makeup of these states because they realize if they can't convince people to be more Democrats, then they're just going to import more Democrats, whether it be legal immigrants or illegal immigrants. They don't care. And so this has been the tete-a-tete between Texas and Biden at this point because Texas is finally, my goodness, finally actually stood up and said, we're going to fight this. And effectively, as of right now, they have done a fantastic job of shutting down the border. And Border Patrol is in an absolute vapor lock situation, because, or I should say the Biden administration is, because I don't believe that anyone in the Border Patrol actually wants to be letting illegal immigrants in. If you talk to these guys, they're not down for this at all. And they're actually, the morale is very, very bad. But what's happening is, of course, they've got orders from on high to let people in, to cut down the concertina wire, et cetera, et cetera. And so what you have is a situation where they don't want to be ordered in to do it. The optics of the situation are absolutely damning for the Biden administration if they go in and start letting this go across. So Texas really has the upper hand here, has won that optics battle. I think they've done a fantastic job in terms of framing the debate, because there were some people that wanted to push this into a, a civil war and states versus federal government kind of thing. But I think Texas did a very good job, and Governor Abbott, and I give him credit for this, did a great job. And I was joking. I said, I roll with Greg. I roll with Greg. That what he was able to do was frame it as an invasion of the state of Texas and use that invasion clause of the Constitution to keep it that way. And so, to your point, it's not necessarily that in their mind, they're not destroying the country. In their mind, they're remaking the country in the image that they have always wanted and installing and importing now a permanent Democrat majority, whereby and keep in mind this, they've already done it in the state of California. You can go back to 1965 and look at California and look at the shifts and look at the population that's been imported into California. That was a solid red state. That was a state that Nixon was the governor of, that Reagan was the governor of, both of which won electorally. Remember, Reagan wins California and Hawaii all the way in 1984, which is not that long ago, almost 40 years ago. And 40 years this year. 40 years ago, Reagan won California. Now it's the bluest of the blue state. Do you think that happened because Democrats were so popular in California and they brought everyone? No, it's because they brought people in who vote Democrat because they know the Democrats give them free stuff. It's as simple as that. And they are trying to do this across the entire country.
So maybe Biden isn't trying to ruin the country then. Maybe he's just trying to make Texas blue, and he picks up all of those electoral votes, and Republicans never win again because they lock up another one of the bigger populated states in the nation. Is that what you're hinting at?
Exactly right. So they want to do to Texas what they did to California, what they did to New Mexico. Arizona, by the way, is currently on the bubble. Remember, Arizona was the reddest of the red state. And then what happened? Arizona became, I call it purpular. It became a purpular state. And then because, illegal immigrants, when they come into the country, or migrants in general, I think migrants is the new word. And I kind of like migrants because it's a lot of them, they say, well, they're not illegal. They're actually asylum seekers. And they say, well, okay, what are they seeking asylum from? Is there a war? Is there, some crackdown, some oppression? They flee communism? What is it? And no, and the Border Patrol, and you'll talk to them, and they say, no, these guys show up and they just say, asylum, asylum. And it's like the one word they know in English. And once they say the word asylum, and this goes back to these ridiculous court cases that we've got, not just this recent one on the Constantino wire, but that essentially says if they claim asylum, or if you have probable cause that they are claiming asylum, then you must let them into the United States. And then, of course, once they get in, there's, oh, we'll schedule for a hearing in 18 months, and they never show up. And now they're released back into the United States. They go into these underground communities. They go into working for job sites. And by the way, this is a huge thing that I absolutely come down on the side of. People know I wasn't a DeSantis guy in the primary, but I think DeSantis is 100% right when it comes to e-verify. You've got to go to the employers. If you actually crack down on the employers who hire illegal aliens, which is a crime, by the way. I know it's like kind of silly that we have to say that. It's actually a crime to hire illegal aliens. If you start going after them, guess what? That flood will turn right back.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Let's actually, what you were saying, it reminds me of the Pirates of the Caribbean movie where Johnny Depp is about to be killed, and he's like, parlay, parlay. I
Exactly.
parlay,
Yeah.
right? So as soon as you say that, even within pirate warfare, they have to shut everything down. They can't go after you. Same thing, asylum, asylum. And then they're like, oh, he must be a good person. Let's go ahead and get him in. He's running from something. But we all know that close to 90% of them, they're not running from anything. They just want to come to the United States because they believe that this is the land of opportunity. And maybe it used to be. I still
No,
think it is.
it's economic migration. Meanwhile, my my wife being from the former Soviet Union in the Republic of Belarus, she's got a sister who's never even been allowed to come to the United States, couldn't even get a visa for our wedding because she's from the wrong part of the world and tried to do it the right way and requested to come in, say, "Hi, my sister's getting married. I'd love to go to the wedding." Rejected, 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 overstay risk, overstay risk. And so it's very interesting to me that the federal government will deliberately allow people from certain parts of the world while deliberately restricting people from other parts of the world to come in.
Wow. Okay, let's talk about this big bombshell that came out from undercover journalist James O'Keefe. He was able to infiltrate and film himself speaking with the cybersecurity guard for the entire White House. This guy opens up that the White House does not like Kamala Harris. They would like her to be replaced, but openly admitted if we got rid of a black woman, we would lose the black vote. We would lose everything. They would go crazy. So now this guy also says that everyone in the White House is aware that Biden is slowing down and his dementia is getting out of control, but that no one is allowed to talk about it out loud. So is the Biden administration literally just covering up a president with dementia and a vice president that really nobody wants in order to retain power for their party?
Yeah, there's so many things that came out of James's latest video, and it's incredible he got it. From the political aspect, clearly, this number one, I would say on the vice presidency, this corroborates a lot of reporting that we had done at Human Events Daily, going back almost 3 years now, where I've been calling it the shade war between the president and the vice president, between Biden and Harris, so the Biden camp and the Harris camp. If you remember early on in the administration, this was getting really heated, where they would hand Kamala Harris these do nothing missions that they knew were going to be failures, like, oh, she's going to be in charge of the border. And if you remember back in 2022, they actually said that she was going to be in charge of Ukraine, and they sent her over to the NATO conference right before Russia invaded. They say, oh, Kamala Harris has got that taken care of. Don't worry, guys. And then she wouldn't actually go to the border. She went down to, some of the, Central America, South America, wouldn't go to the border itself, though. I think they put the economy on her portfolio at one point. And so this was really being done because they saw Kamala Harris as angling to take Joe Biden out. Now, what would the result of all of this? Very simple. They showed that Kamala Harris has no chops. She has no ability to operate on the main stage. She is not ready for prime time and probably never will be. So she's gotten her chance and she's lost it completely. Now, this is a huge This is a huge angle as well for the 2028 primary, or, by the way, if there is potentially a lottery, or as I call it, the Democrat shadow primary, of having someone to replace Biden, which, if you notice, they do kind of talk about the Democrat. I noticed when the staffer, when James asks him, and he's in this sort of, he's playing as if he's like a grinder date kind of thing there. And are you sure they'll both be on the ticket? Oh, they'll both be on the ticket. Of course, of course. He's trying to reassure himself as he's reassuring James that both Biden and Kamala will be on the ticket, even though it sounds like neither of them actually want to be there. So the question is, if Biden were to leave, who would replace him? I've argued for a long time that that's going to follow the money flow. And of course, there are two people that are vying for the biggest pot of money in Democrat politics, this being the Silicon Valley mega billionaires. And the Silicon Valley mega billionaires, California, who are the two candidates from or potential candidates from California, one of which, of course, as we know, Gavin Newsom. The other one, the former senator of California, Kamala Harris. I think that money at this point, the easy money on that is going to say that's going to get to Gavin. They're going to look at Kamala and say, you know what? There's no way we want to prop up this dead horse candidate. We're going to go with Gavin Newsom. Now, there are some other scenarios where they could put Kamala in as a way to sort of get rid of her because they just know Trump's going to sweep, so they want to just get rid of her by having her be the sort of sacrificial lamb, and that's a scenario that I could also get behind. But going back to the video, one of the other key, I think, elements that we receive from this, of course, hiding the fact that he has dementia, hiding the fact that he's slowing down. Obviously, hear him admit it, but I say as a former Navy intelligence officer that what you're seeing here is, I would say thank God that James O'Keefe is the one who ran the sting on this guy. And thank God that this wasn't Chinese intelligence or Russian intelligence or Iranian intelligence, because what they're showing is that this is someone, again, a security officer, a security director at high levels of the White House. And people are saying, well, wait, why is this guy so young? Guess what? That's the average age of a White House staffer, particularly in this administration and definitely during the Obama administration as well. These are the people making the decisions. Look how susceptible to blackmail and honeypotting that guy would be, because all it would take were a couple of dates and a couple of bad photos come out, and then all of a sudden you've heard about honeypot operations and how they work, and then all of a sudden for the third date, the fourth date, they show up and someone else is in the room and he's smoking a cigarette, and he said, oh yes, we have it would be very bad if these photos were published on the internet, and so here's what you're going to do for us. Here's how, and this is how they are able to corrupt people. This is how they're able to target people. The fact that James O'Keefe was able to get this guy so easily, by the way, he didn't even hire anyone to do it. He did it himself. He did it himself with like he just did some like hairspray to make himself blonde, and, put on some eggshell glasses like John Lennon.
I like how he took off his glasses like Clark Kent. It's like,
yeah, the Clark
don't you
Kent
know who I
moment just
am?
made it.
All I had to do was put on.
Did you know you're on a meeting with James O'Keefe? Yeah, I was doing an X Spaces with James last night, and we were joking about it. And I said, "Did you do that on purpose?" And he kind of smiled. He said, "Yeah, maybe."
Yeah,
it's like, James, yeah. we know you're a theatrical guy, James. He likes to do his theater. So what it really shows to me is the fact that the Biden administration is staffed by people who are just an absolute clown show. It's an absolute circus. When you're looking at any of those crises that I outlined, if you're looking at the economy right now, it's very clear. It's because you've got guys like this running the show in the Biden administration. That is why the Middle East is absolutely spiraling out of control. That's why Zelensky looks like he's on life support. He's hanging by a thread in Kiev right now. Very susceptible to a military coup, by the way, extremely susceptible to a military coup in Kiev. And all of this is being done because you've got guys like that, or Vicky Nuland, at the top levels of the White House, basically running the show. Well, again, the old guy is walking around looking for the creamed prunes from Jill Biden, and said, can I get some more? I'm a little hungry. And he goes to bed at 5 p.m.
Yeah, it was a little bit scary to think, okay, on the first date, this security cyber guy, I'm guessing he's gay. But within one day, a little bit of charming, a little bit of alcohol, he starts giving up all of the secrets about the White House. The first date. I mean,
this shows how bad it would be, or how easy it would be, I would say, for any foreign intelligence service to walk right up to the Biden administration. You hire a couple of guys like that or a couple of girls, whatever it takes, and you could gain immediate access to the highest levels of decision making. And quite frankly, just looking at it from this perspective, you would have to say from a security standpoint that it's probably already happened, right? You probably already have penetration of the Biden White House if it's simply this easy.
Yeah, no, I think the penetration was over in the Senate room with that gay sex tape that leaked.
But
But
with no
according to
charges, no
according
charges.
to the headlines, the police aren't going to press charges just because they filmed it, just because. But they're saying
So
because they
you
have a
can
key card, technically they have the right to do whatever they want in that room.
so you can go and walk peacefully around the Senate, around the Capitol building, a public building, and you can be arrested and thrown in jail for the rest of your life, right? If you don't do that with, again, permission. This nebulous, did you have permission? Well, the door was open, they beckoned me in, right? I'm talking about January 6th. That's illegal. But if you film hardcore gay sex and post it on the internet and broadcast it for the world to see, that's perfectly fine, and you didn't do anything wrong. And I would say that just really shows you the state of the United States government right now. Look, the U.S. Capitol Police was a so here's how to understand the U.S. Capitol Police. Because people say, wait a minute, that's law enforcement. I thought conservatives, Republicans were generally, back to blue, pro law enforcement. What gives? But then as people learn more about the Capitol Police, they say, this agency seem kind of leftist. Like these seem like kind of leftist cops. What's going on here? And so what happened was you have to understand that in American politics from the 1950s all the way up until 1994, when Newt Gingrich gained control of the speakership, when the Republicans won this big 94 landslide, the entire House was controlled by Democrats for a very long time. And so the infrastructure of the Capitol during that time period was all put into place by Democrats. So you had an entire signature of this patronage system essentially of Democrats promoting their friends all the way up. And this is how the U.S. Capitol Police were formed. Again, I'm talking about the higher levels. So at the higher levels, the leadership is all Democrat, has been all Democrat. It's been this way for a very long time. And unfortunately, when the Republicans got back in the 90s, or even when they took back over in the 2000s, they never really did anything to reform that system. And so you still have this system of Democrat patronage in the U.S. Capitol Police system that's been there since the 1990s.
Wow, interesting. Okay. So let me get your thoughts on this. Top gambling websites are putting Representative Elise Stefanik as
Okay.
the most likely person that Donald Trump will pick. After that is Kristi Noem, Governor Kristi Noem, and then former presidential candidate Vivek Ramaswamy. What are your thoughts on that? And then what are your thoughts on who Trump might actually pick?
Well, I wouldn't always go with the betting sites when it comes to these things. I mean, they once had Ron DeSantis as winning the 2024 presidential primary. We saw what happened there, so it's understandable. But let's take it with a grain of salt. Yeah, I know Congresswoman Stefanik. I think she's fantastic. We all saw the just absolute pummeling she gave to the Ivy League yeah, presidents and heads when they came in recently, Harvard and Penn. I think that really put her on the national map. I know President Trump obviously watched that, and more importantly, it's not just that he watched the hearing, because anyone can have this. Mark Zuckerberg was up yesterday, and he had this fiery grilling from the Senate. But the real question is, okay, you have a fiery grilling at the Senate, you have a fiery hearing, that's great, but what came of it? Did anything actually happen? Well, you know something. President of Harvard had to step down, and the president of Penn had to step down, which is a place that, of course, President Trump is he is a Penn alumnus. He went to Wharton. And so I think he saw the fact that she got results. Okay, she absolutely got results with what she did there, and some of the obviously most prestigious and powerful institutions in the country, possibly the world, and that she was able to do that. So I think that's something that really propelled her to the highest ranks of this, and the fact that she's just generally been a strong Trump supporter, a strong America First congresswoman in general during the time that she's been in office. So I would certainly say you can't have a conversation without her. Vivek Ramaswamy, of course, this idea that he ran for president, and people say, okay, well, he only got 7%. He's a failed candidate, and I say, he went from nothing, right? He went from zero to hero, right? 0 to 7 is much harder than going and, take a Ron DeSantis. He had been, he was a congressman, and then he was a governor, and then he was running. So he's got a long history of being this, this typical career politician kind of track that you see running for president. And so he gets, he ends up with about 12%. Nikki Haley, again, also a governor, had a national position as the UN ambassador. She gets about 11%. And so, they followed those sort of typical career politician tracks. Vivek Ramaswamy comes literally out of nowhere and gets 7% all by himself. I think that's a tremendous feat. And so I think that, plus the fact that when he first came out, I think he was just feeling out the room, figuring out what was going to happen. But then somewhere along the way, he started learning more about how the system works and how corrupt politics is in America today. And he just became this. He got based. I don't know. He got red pilled, I guess you would say, as the kids say. And so I think that new version of Vivek 2.0 was very formidable, and someone who I definitely would say is in the running. I wouldn't say that he's first, but I say you can't have the conversation without him. Ron DeSantis. So a lot of people say, and a lot of the DeSantis supporters, people in that camp, you're hearing these trial balloons saying, "Hey, wait a minute, this guy, he's the governor of a state, very successful governor. He was your biggest rival. You have the opportunity to pick him up. Potentially, he could help you in the suburbs. He could help you with some of these areas that you need help with." And so I see on paper why that might make sense, but I just think there's so much bad blood between the two sides there. And the fact that he took $130 million just on the super PAC side, not even for his own campaign, $130 million that could have been used to target voters in the fall, $130 million that could have been used for these ballot people say I'm not allowed to say ballot harvesting because some of the states you can't ballot harvest. So ballot chasing, ballot harvesting, ballot contacting, whatever you want to call it, right? Ballot operations in the fall that regardless of who the candidate is, that money could have gone to. And so, look, I think that because of that, and because DeSantis continues to criticize Trump, even after he's already left the race and endorsed him, I just don't see it happening. I really don't see it happening. And then you mentioned Kristi Noem as well. Possibility. I would say possibility. I think there's a there's a phrase in pro wrestling, and I used to watch a lot of pro wrestling when I grew up, and there's a lot of pro wrestling terms that they came up with that are useful for politics. And if she were a pro wrestler, you would say she's good, but she's not over. She hasn't beaten anyone yet. She hasn't had some big victory to get her over with the audience. Nobody's really coming out cheering Kristi Noem, Kristi. It's just not there. There's something that's not quite been there yet. And there were a few times where she had opportunities, like standing up against this trans bill that was being passed in the South Dakota legislature, and she refused. She refused to stand up against that bill, and she went on Tucker Carlson and all that. And so people have seen these opportunities to say, well, is Kristi Noem really the kind of fighter that we want? And I like Kristi Noem. I think she's a good person. But again, we're talking about someone who, number one, if you're going to be the vice president under Donald Trump, remember, because he's term limited under the U.S. Constitution, he cannot run again. That means whoever gets this spot is going to be in position essentially to be the, kind of heir apparent to the America First movement, the MAGA movement, and everyone understands this. So there's really two options. Do you go with and this is where I kind of come in, do you go with somebody who's ambitious, that wants to be the next, the new leader of the party, or do you go with someone who's not ambitious and just wants to tear the place completely down? And I think that's actually the more fun answer. And so when I look at someone like that, I would say that's what, I've said this publicly a few times, like a Rand Paul, put him on the ticket, really just go after the administrative state. Or if you're looking at it from a geographical standpoint, who's sort of who's that fire in the belly, wants to take it to the administrative state individual of the Midwest. I would say Ron Johnson, the senator of Wisconsin, who, by the way, won Wisconsin in 2022, so has shown that he's able to win in the Rust Belt. and absolutely someone who is not going to take anything that the administrative state or the legislature says publicly, and a guy who's been, if you've been watching this border bill, has been absolutely just an absolute champion for the American interest and not afraid to call out Langford or call out McConnell on this. And so, I think he grew that beard and somehow he just got, it gave him superpowers. And I think that might be, I don't know, Stephen, maybe you consider it.
Yeah. I really like Fake. People were worried that he was a plant, a George Soros, funded person. I kept doing my research, and after watching him and researching him, I ended up interviewing him 3 different times. I think he's the real deal. I think he's incredibly intelligent. I also like the idea of a Trump Tucker Carlson ticket. I think
wouldn't that be wonderful?
Oh, but I don't know if Tucker wants to give up his
well,
new.
so I had Tucker on the show on Human Events, and we did a huge interview and viral and all that. And I kept kind of poking him about it during the interview. And the way that, when I asked him basically, do you want to do it? And he said, I don't know, I've never done anything like that, where he gave his kind of static answer. So then I tried running an angle on him, and I spent some time in the interrogation cell at Guantanamo. So they teach you running angles. And so the angle I said was, okay, well, you'd be fine if Nikki Haley was on the ticket then with President Trump. And he just stops. He just stops cold. And he looks at me and goes, excuse me? Excuse me, Nikki. I said, well, Tucker, if it's not you, he's probably going to choose Nikki Haley. So he's like, they're not serious. People aren't actually. No, no, that can't happen. So, maybe that's a way to get, talk him into it.
Oh my gosh, that was a gangster move to catch him off guard. Well, Jack, thank you so much for coming on, discussing these big topics. I really appreciate it. If people want to follow you, stay in the loop, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, of course. Human Events Daily. We're there an hour every day. So 2 to 3 p.m. Real America's Voice. We come on right after Bannon and Charlie Kirk. Put the podcast out, Rumble, YouTube, etc. as well. And then, of course, people know I occasionally post on X. Go viral every once in a while when apparently I have all the Swifties very upset at me. And the media is very upset about all that. And I don't know what it was. I just posted a couple tweets that said it looks like they're going to use her against Trump in the fall, and the entire mainstream media is losing their minds at me right now. So I've got Joyanne Weave, I've got CNN, I've got James Carville. It's really amazing.
Yeah, leave her alone. She's a sweet person. I don't mind her music. I'm sure our political beliefs are very different.
But I didn't say anything about her music. That was the craziest part. I was like, they're just going to use her to harvest votes in the fall. That's all I said. And it's like, oh, they're clearly setting this up with the Time magazine, and then now the Super Bowl on top of that, and the romance. I was like, my goodness, they're going to flip a switch in the fall, get the Swiftie vote out for Biden, and it's clearly going to be something they're going to do in the swing states. All I said, and boy. Wow. What can I say? I really must have kicked over a hornet's nest with that one.
Yeah. The one thing that I did read is that she may not want to connect herself to Biden right now because he and many of the top Democrat leaders, they're getting so much pushback about all the people being killed in Gaza that she may not want to link her brand.
Well, this is a huge issue that Biden has right now, right? Because one of the main reasons that Biden is losing so badly with Gen Z, as well as with Muslim American voters in states like Michigan, Minnesota, and Virginia. Obviously, Minnesota, Ilhan Omar gives this speech. And I think a lot of conservatives saw that speech and said, oh, I can't stand Ilhan Omar, blah, blah, blah. I said, no, wait a minute. You guys don't understand. She's giving an anti-Biden speech, right? Because she's attacking the policies of her own side. So the squad is totally against Biden at this point, and they've got all of Gen Z through TikTok, totally against Israel. And so I to your point, right? This is why it's to the Bidens. It would be very smart politics for them if they could get Taylor Swift on board. I think if you're the Democrats right now, why wouldn't you be thinking this way?
Yeah. Interesting. We'll see how it all works out. Thank you so much. I hope you have a great rest of your day.
God bless, man.